The Admiral's voice carried across the graduation lawn like a blade meant to draw blood. "Sir, I'm gonna need you to step out of the family section. This area is reserved for actual guests." The man in the threadbare blazer didn't move. His hands, scarred across the knuckles and steady as stone, remained folded in his lap. What Rear Admiral Vincent Harlow didn't know, what no one on that pristine Naval Academy lawn could have known, was that those hands had once held his life in their crosshairs and chosen to save it. In exactly 20 minutes, the Admiral would understand exactly who he had just tried to humiliate. The May sun beat down on Tecumseh Court with the kind of brightness that made dress whites gleam and metal shine. Rows of midshipmen stood in perfect formation, their futures stretching before them like the Chesapeake beyond the seawall. Families filled the white, folding chairs arranged in precise naval rows. Mothers dabbing at eyes already wet with pride, fathers sitting straighter than they had in years. And in the third row from the back, in a seat he had confirmed 6 times on the official ticket, Elias Vance sat in a blazer 2 sizes too large and pants with a hem he had restitched himself the night before. Before we continue with what happened next, we want to know where you're watching from today. Stories of hidden heroes like this one happen everywhere, sometimes sitting right next to us at the moments that matter most. Drop a comment below and tell us your city or country. You might know someone whose quiet sacrifice goes completely unnoticed. And if stories like this speak to you, please consider subscribing. Now, let us continue. The Admiral stood over him like a man accustomed to being obeyed. His chest carried enough ribbons to wallpaper a small room, and his posture broadcast 4 decades of expecting lesser men to move when he told them to move. He had spotted Elias from 30 yards away and crossed the lawn with the purposeful stride of someone about to solve a problem. "I have a ticket," Elias said. His voice came out soft, roughened by years of disuse and night shifts spent in silence. He reached into his breast pocket slowly, the way a man learns to move when he has spent a lifetime around people who react poorly to sudden gestures. The ticket was creased and worn at the edges from being checked and rechecked, folded and unfolded 100 times since it arrived in the mail 8 weeks ago. Admiral Harlow glanced at the paper without really seeing it. "Anyone can get a ticket. I'm asking if you belong here." He said it loud enough for the surrounding families to hear, and a few heads turned. A woman in pearls looked away quickly, embarrassed on behalf of everyone involved. A man in a sport coat studied his program with sudden intensity. "My daughter is graduating today, sir." Elias kept his eyes forward, fixed on the empty stage where the ceremony would soon begin. "Maya Elaine Vance. She is receiving her commission as an ensign." "Your daughter." The Admiral let the words hang with theatrical disbelief. Which one would that be? It was not a question. It was an accusation dressed in the shape of one. Elias felt the familiar heat rise in his chest, the anger he had learned to bank decades ago, to transform into something cold and useful. He let it settle. He let it pass. "She is in the 3rd platoon, sir. 4th row." Elias did not point. He did not need to. He knew exactly where Maya stood because he had memorized the formation chart she had sent him, had traced her position with his finger every night for the past week, had dreamed of this moment for 22 years. The Admiral's eyes narrowed. Around them, the crowd's attention was beginning to crystallize, conversations dying mid-sentence as people sensed the particular electricity of public confrontation. A security officer near the stage noticed and began moving toward them. A woman in a captain's uniform looked up from her tablet, her gaze sharpening as it landed on the scene unfolding in the family section. Something about the seated man caught her attention. Not his clothes, which were clearly secondhand, not his weathered face or his calloused hands. It was the way he held himself under pressure. Perfectly still, perfectly controlled. The kind of stillness she had only ever seen in men who had been trained to wait for hours in positions that would break ordinary bodies. "Look," the Admiral said, spreading his hands in a gesture of false reasonableness. "I am not trying to cause a scene. But this is the United States Naval Academy. These families have sacrificed to be here. Their sons and daughters have earned this moment. And I cannot have someone who wandered in off the street disrupting that. I did not wander in, sir." Elias's voice remained level. I took 3 buses from Newport News. Left at 4 in the morning to make sure I would not be late. The Admiral's jaw tightened. Something about this man's calm was getting under his skin, and he did not like things that got under his skin. He had built a career on being unflappable, on controlling every room he entered. This shabby figure with his thrift store clothes and his quiet dignity was not following the script. The captain with the tablet had moved closer now, close enough to see the details she had been trying to make out from a distance. The seated man's sleeves were slightly too long, but when he had reached for his ticket, they had ridden up just enough to reveal the edge of something on his forearm. Dark ink, faded by time and sun. The corner of what might have been a trident. Her breath caught. She pulled up a database on her tablet, her fingers moving with sudden urgency. "Tell you what," Admiral Harlow said, his voice taking on the tone of a man about to deliver a killing blow. "Since you claim to be one of us, why do you not prove it?" He smiled, playing to the watching crowd. "What is your call sign, sailor?" The question landed like a slap. Around them, the families who understood military culture recognized it for what it was: a challenge, a trap, an invitation to expose a fraud. Call signs were earned, not chosen. They were given by brothers who had seen you at your worst and your best. They were sacred. Elias's jaw tightened. His hand moved unconsciously to his chest, pressing against something beneath his shirt. A ring on a chain. A reminder of a promise made 22 years ago to a woman who did not live to see it kept. Call sign. The words stirred something in him. Something he had buried in the same place. He kept the memories of blood and sand and the weight of a brother dying in his arms. Something he had walked away from so he could be present for the girl who was about to walk across that stage. The captain's tablet chimed softly. Her face went pale. Admiral Harlow leaned in, satisfaction spreading across his features. "That is what I thought." Security. 2 officers began moving toward them, their faces set in the professional blankness of men about to do an unpleasant job. The families nearby had given up all pretense of not watching. Somewhere in the formation of midshipmen, a young woman with her father's eyes felt her stomach drop as she sensed something wrong in the family section but could not see what. Elias looked at the Admiral, at the security officers approaching, at the captain with her tablet and her pale face, at the crowd that had already judged him and found him wanting. And he made a decision. He had spent 18 years as a ghost, 18 years keeping his secrets so his daughter could have a father instead of a legend. 18 years working night shifts and double jobs so he could be there for every recital, every game, every tear-filled phone call from a dorm room 3 states away. But some things were worth more than secrets. Some lessons were worth teaching, even if they cost everything. His voice, when it finally came, was barely above a whisper. But somehow it carried. "I have only ever answered to 1 call sign, sir." The security officers stopped. The captain stepped forward. Admiral Harlow's smile flickered. And Elias Vance, who had not spoken these words aloud in 18 years, felt the ghost begin to rise. The words hung in the air between them, and for a moment the entire graduation ceremony seemed to hold its breath. But before Elias could speak the name he had buried for nearly 2 decades, the sharp crack of a microphone being tested split the silence. The ceremony was beginning. Admiral Harlow glanced toward the stage, his public duties suddenly more pressing than the shabby man he had been trying to remove. "This is not over," he said, pointing a finger at Elias. "Stay right there. Security will deal with you after the procession." He straightened his uniform and strode toward the stage, leaving Elias alone with the weight of everything he had almost said. The captain with the tablet lingered a moment longer, her eyes searching his face for something she could not quite name, before duty pulled her away to follow the Admiral. Elias sat back down slowly. His hands were trembling now, the adrenaline of 18 years of silence almost breaking, finding no release. He pressed his palm against his chest again, feeling the familiar shape of Sarah's ring beneath his shirt, and let the memory of her voice wash over him like a tide. "You have to promise me," she had said, the night before his last deployment, her hands wrapped around a cup of tea that had long gone cold. "Promise me you will come home." Not just your body, Eli. You, the man I married, the father Maya needs. He had promised. He had meant it with everything he was. And then she had died while he was 8,000 miles away, her car wrapped around a guardrail on a rainy Tuesday morning, and he had not been there to hold her hand or tell her he loved her or say goodbye. He had been in a valley in Afghanistan, doing things that would remain classified until everyone involved was dead, and his wife had taken her last breath alone. The guilt of it had nearly destroyed him. For months after he came home, he had walked through their apartment like a ghost himself, unable to look at Maya without seeing Sarah's eyes staring back at him, unable to hold his daughter without feeling the weight of every moment he had missed, every bedtime story he had not told, every scraped knee he had not bandaged. He had made a choice then, a choice that had cost him everything he had built in 22 years of service. He resigned his commission. The Admiral who had tried to talk him out of it had not understood. Men like you do not just walk away, he had said. You are a legend, Master Chief. Iron Ghost, do you know how many operators would kill for your record? Elias had looked at him with eyes that had seen too much death to be impressed by records. My daughter needs a father, sir. Not a legend. Not a ghost. A father. He had walked out of that office and never looked back. Had packed away his medals in a shoebox and shoved them under the bed. Had taken the first job he could find, a night shift at a warehouse, so he could be there when Maya woke up in the morning. So he could make her breakfast and walk her to school and sit in the front row at every single event that mattered. The warehouse job had become a factory job, had become a janitorial position at an elementary school 3 blocks from their apartment. The pay was nothing. The hours were brutal. But he could work from 10 at night until 6 in the morning and still be home to see Maya off to school. Could still help with homework and attend parent-teacher conferences and be the father he had promised Sarah he would be. He had never told Maya the full truth, had never shown her the medals or explained the scars or answered her questions about why he sometimes woke up screaming in languages she did not recognize. She knew he had served. She knew he had been a SEAL. But the details, the operations, the things he had done and the brothers he had lost, those he had kept locked away in the same place, he kept the memory of Sarah's voice. Some burdens were too heavy to share with a child, even a child who had grown into a woman, even a woman who was about to become an officer. The procession began, and Elias leaned forward in his seat, his eyes scanning the rows of white uniforms until he found her. 3rd platoon, 4th row, just where she had said she would be. Maya Elaine Vance, her mother's cheekbones and her father's stubborn jaw, marching in perfect step with her fellow midshipmen. His throat tightened, his vision blurred. 22 years. 22 years of sacrifice and silence, and working himself to the bone so she could have this moment. And here she was, about to receive her commission, about to become the officer he had never allowed himself to be. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a photograph, edges worn soft from 1,000 touches. Maya at 6 years old, gap-toothed smile and pigtails askew, holding up a crayon drawing of a stick figure in a uniform. My daddy the hero, she had written in wobbly letters. He had carried this photo through night shifts and double shifts and every dark moment when the memories threatened to pull him under. Still here, baby girl, he whispered, still trying. On the stage, Admiral Harlow was taking his position at the podium, preparing to deliver the keynote address that would launch these young officers into their careers. He did not glance toward the family section, did not spare a thought for the shabby man he had tried to humiliate. But Captain Diane Reyes did. She stood at the edge of the stage, her tablet clutched against her chest, her mind racing through the implications of what she had found. The database search had returned a file so heavily redacted it was more black bars than text. But the call sign was visible right there in the header. Iron Ghost. And below it, a list of operations that read like a history of every classified mission in the last 3 decades. Dates and coordinates and casualty counts, all of it scrubbed clean of context but heavy with implication. She looked out at the family section, at the man in the threadbare blazer who was staring at the procession with tears streaming silently down his weathered face. At his hands, scarred and steady, clutching a photograph like a lifeline. She thought about the Admiral's mocking question. What is your call sign, sailor? She thought about the tattoo she had glimpsed on his forearm. Coordinates. A date. The corner of a trident. And she thought about Operation Crimson Tide, the mission she had studied at intelligence school, the one they used as a case study for what happened when a single operator violated orders and saved 19 lives. The operator's identity had never been declassified. The file referred to him only by his call sign. Iron Ghost. Captain Reyes looked at Admiral Harlow, resplendent in his ribbons and his certainty. She looked at Elias Vance, shabby and silent, and crying at the sight of his daughter. And she realized with a cold certainty that the Admiral had just made the worst mistake of his career. The graduation ceremony continued around them, the familiar rhythms of tradition and honor playing out beneath the Maryland sun. But something had shifted. Something was coming. And when it arrived, nothing would ever be the same. Elias tucked the photograph back into his pocket, wiped his eyes with the back of his hand, and waited for his daughter to walk across that stage. He had waited 18 years for this moment. He could wait a little longer for the truth to find its way into the light. Admiral Harlow's keynote address washed over the crowd like a tide of polished rhetoric. He spoke of honor and sacrifice, of the long tradition of naval excellence, of the weight of the oath these young officers were about to take. His voice carried the practiced cadence of a man who had given this speech 100 times before, each word calibrated for maximum impact. Elias barely heard any of it. He was watching Maya, tracking her position in the formation with the same precision he had once used to track targets through a rifle scope. She stood so straight, so proud, her chin lifted and her shoulders squared against the weight of everything she was about to become. She looked so much like Sarah in that moment that it physically hurt. The security officers had not returned. Whatever urgent duties the ceremony demanded had apparently taken priority over removing one shabby man from the family section. But Elias could feel eyes on him still. The families nearby who had witnessed the confrontation. The captain with her tablet, glancing his way every few minutes with an expression he could not quite read. And the Admiral himself, who paused mid-sentence to sweep his gaze across the crowd and let it linger, just for a moment, on the third row from the back. The speech continued. Harlow spoke of his own career, his own sacrifices, the missions he had led, and the men he had commanded. He spoke of a particular operation in Afghanistan, years ago, when he had learned what it truly meant to lead under fire. Elias's hands tightened on his knees. "I was a young lieutenant then," Harlow said, his voice taking on the weight of rehearsed emotion. "My platoon was ambushed in a valley in Khyber province. We were pinned down, taking casualties, with no extraction possible, and air support 40 minutes away. I thought we were going to die there, every single one of us." The crowd listened in rapt silence. This was the kind of story they had come to hear. Real sacrifice, real heroism, the stuff of legends. "But we survived," Harlow continued, "because someone, somewhere, made a choice to act. An Overwatch team violated their orders to observe and engage the enemy, creating the opening we needed to extract. I never learned who they were. The operation was classified above my clearance level. But I have carried the weight of that debt every single day since." He paused, letting the moment breathe. "That is what service means," he said. "That is what sacrifice looks like. Unknown, unrecognized, given freely with no expectation of reward." Elias felt the words land like physical blows. His chest ached with the effort of keeping his breathing steady. 18 years of silence pressed against his throat, demanding release. He remembered that valley, remembered the radio chatter, the desperation in young Lieutenant Harlow's voice as he called for support that was not coming. Remembered Beacon beside him on the ridge, his spotter's voice calm and steady even as they watched 19 men dying below. "We cannot just watch them die, Ghost." Beacon had said it like a simple statement of fact. "Like the weather. Like gravity." "I know," Elias had replied. And then he had done the math. The angles, the distances, the number of rounds he would need, and the time he would have before enemy countersnipers found their position. "I am violating orders," he had said. "You can stay." Beacon had laughed. That quiet laugh that Elias still heard in his dreams sometimes. Like hell. On stage, Admiral Harlow was concluding his remarks about unknown heroes and unsung sacrifice. The irony of it sat in Elias's stomach like broken glass. The Admiral did not know, had never known. The files had kept them separated by walls of classification and need-to-know clearances. Harlow had built an entire career on the foundation of that survival, had risen to Admiral on the strength of the lessons he claimed to have learned in that valley, and he had never once learned the name of the man who made it possible. The man he had just tried to have removed from his daughter's graduation. Captain Reyes had moved closer during the speech. She stood now at the edge of the family section, her tablet held against her chest like a shield, her eyes fixed on Elias with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. She knows, he realized, or she suspects. She has found something in whatever database she was searching, and now she's trying to decide what to do with it. The speech ended. Applause rippled across the lawn. Admiral Harlow stepped back from the podium with the satisfied expression of a man who had once again delivered exactly what was expected of him. The commissioning ceremony began. One by one, the newly minted ensigns stepped forward to take their oaths, to have their shoulder boards changed, to become officers in the United States Navy. Families cheered and cameras flashed, and the ancient ritual of transformation played out beneath the unforgiving sun. Elias waited. Third platoon approached the stage. Fourth row. Maya's turn was coming. And then he saw them. The two security officers from before, threading their way through the crowd, toward the family section. They had not forgotten. They were simply waiting for the right moment. A moment when removing him would cause minimal disruption to the ceremony. They were coming for him. Elias looked at the stage, where Maya was 3 positions away from being called. Looked at the security officers, who were perhaps 90 seconds from reaching him. Looked at Captain Reyes, who had seen the officers too, and was moving to intercept them with an expression of urgent purpose. He could leave now, could stand up and walk away quietly, disappear into the crowd before Maya ever knew what had happened. She would be disappointed, confused, hurt, but she would not have to watch her father dragged away from her commissioning ceremony like a vagrant. Or he could stay, could trust that whatever Captain Reyes had found would be enough to stop what was coming, could let the truth rise to the surface after 18 years of darkness. Maya Elaine Vance, the announcer, called. His daughter stepped forward, her white uniform blazing in the sunlight, her face composed and serious and beautiful. The security officers were 40 feet away now. Captain Reyes was speaking to them urgently, her tablet extended, trying to show them something. And Elias made his choice. He stood, not to leave, not to run, but to see his daughter clearly, without obstruction, without anything between them in the moment she became an officer. The movement caught Maya's eye. She looked out into the family section, searching, and found him there. Her father, standing in his threadbare blazer with tears streaming down his face. She smiled, and everything else fell away. The security officers stopped, confused by the sudden change in their target's posture. Captain Reyes seized the moment, stepping between them and Elias, her voice low and fierce. Elias did not hear what she said. He did not care. He was watching his daughter take her oath, watching her transform from the gap-toothed girl in the photograph to the woman she had become, watching 22 years of sacrifice and silence culminate in a single, perfect moment. And somewhere deep inside him, the ghost began to stir. The memory came unbidden, rising through the years like a body, surfacing from deep water. March 17, 2006. The Hindu Kush Mountains stretched in every direction, ancient and indifferent to the small dramas of men killing each other in their shadows. Elias lay prone on a ridge at 1,200 meters elevation, his cheek pressed against the stock of his rifle, his eye married to the scope that showed him everything happening in the valley below. Beacon lay beside him, rangefinder pressed to his face, voice a steady murmur of calculations. Wind from the east, 6 knots. Humidity 42%. Range to primary cluster 1,100 and change. Elias made the adjustments without conscious thought. His hands knew this work better than they knew anything else in the world. 20 years of training and combat had carved these movements into his muscle memory until they were as automatic as breathing. Below them, 19 Americans were dying. The ambush had been perfect. Taliban fighters had waited until Lieutenant Harlow's platoon was deep in the valley, committed to a route with no easy extraction, and then closed the trap from 3 directions. RPGs had disabled the lead and rear vehicles within seconds of each other. Small arms fire poured down from the ridgelines. The platoon had scattered into whatever cover they could find, but cover was scarce, and the enemy knew every rock and shadow. Elias could hear the radio traffic through his earpiece. Harlow's voice, young and cracking with the strain of watching his men die. Requesting immediate air support. Requesting extraction. Requesting anything. The responses came back cold and clinical. Air support 40 minutes out. Extraction not possible under current fire. Hold position and await relief. Hold position. As if there was any position left to hold. As if 40 minutes was not an eternity when men were bleeding out in the dust. Ghost, we have orders. Beacon's voice was carefully neutral. Observe and report only. Do not engage. Elias did not respond. He was counting muzzle flashes, counting positions, counting the seconds between shots that told him which fighters were disciplined and which were spraying ammunition in panic. He was building a map in his mind, a 3-dimensional model of death and angles and possibilities. Ghost, I heard you. So what are we doing? Elias pulled back from his scope just long enough to look at his spotter. Beacon's face was calm, but his eyes held a question that had nothing to do with orders or protocols. It was the question that every operator faced eventually. What are you willing to sacrifice for the men who cannot save themselves? How many targets can you mark in the next 30 seconds? Elias asked. Beacon smiled. That small, quiet smile that Elias would remember for the rest of his life. All of them, brother. All of them. They worked in silence after that. Beacon calling coordinates, Elias adjusting, acquiring, breathing out slowly as his finger found the trigger. The first shot was the longest he had ever attempted under combat conditions. 1,163 meters through a crosswind that wanted to push the round into the mountainside. The Taliban commander's head snapped back, and the radio traffic below changed pitch. Elias did not pause to appreciate the shot. He was already moving to the next target, and the next, and the next. Beacon fed him numbers like a machine, his voice never wavering even as return fire began to search for their position. 14 confirmed kills in 9 minutes. Elias would learn that number later, in a debrief that would be classified so deep that even the men he saved would never read it. In the moment, he did not count. He simply worked. Target, breathe, fire. Target, breathe, fire. Creating a gap in the enemy line wide enough for 19 men to slip through. They are moving, Beacon reported. Harlow has them moving, but the enemy had found them now. Rounds began impacting the ridge around their position, close enough to throw dirt into Elias's scope. A counter-sniper team had triangulated their location, and the mathematics of the situation had shifted dramatically. Time ago, Elias said. They rose together, moving in the half-crouch that became instinct after enough years in the mountains. The extraction point was 400 meters east, a shallow depression where a helicopter could touch down long enough to collect them. They were 300 meters from safety when Beacon saw the glint. Ghost down. He did not tackle Elias, did not push him aside. There was no time for any of that. He simply stepped into the path of the round that was already in flight, his body interposing itself between the bullet and his brother. The impact spun him around. Elias caught him before he hit the ground, already pressing his hands against the wound, already knowing from the location and the volume of blood that there was nothing to be done. Beacon's eyes found his. Focused even now. Clear. Femoral, he said, as if diagnosing someone else's injury. 90 seconds, maybe less. No. Elias pressed harder, uselessly. No, you hold on. Extraction is coming. Beacon's hand found his wrist, gripped it with surprising strength. Get them home, Ghost. His voice was fading, the words coming slower now. Get yourself home. And then, with the last of his breath, live enough for both of us. Promise me. I promise. The words came out broken. I promise, brother. Beacon smiled one more time. That quiet smile. And then he was gone. Elias carried him 4 miles to extraction. Through enemy territory, through the aftermath of the battle he had created, through the silence of mountains that did not care whether men lived or died. He carried his brother's body, because leaving him was not something he knew how to do. The helicopter crew had tried to stop him, tried to make him leave the body and board quickly. He had looked at them with eyes that held nothing human left in them, and they had stepped aside. He had carried Beacon all the way home. The memory released him slowly, and Elias found himself back on the Naval Academy lawn, tears cooling on his cheeks, his hand pressed against the challenge coin in his pocket. The coin that had been in Beacon's pocket when he died. The coin that Elias had carried every single day for 18 years. On stage, Maya had completed her oath. She was an ensign now, an officer, everything her mother had dreamed she would become. And somewhere in the crowd behind him, Admiral Harlow was watching with no idea that the man he had tried to humiliate had once carried his salvation down a mountain on broken feet. 1 brother dead and 19 others alive because of choices that would never be acknowledged. Still here, brother, Elias whispered to the coin in his pocket. Still trying. Captain Diane Reyes had seen a lot of classified material in her 15 years as an intelligence officer. She had read reports that would give civilian oversight committees nightmares. She had briefed admirals on operations that officially never happened. She had learned to keep her face neutral no matter what words appeared on her screen. But standing in the family section of a Naval Academy graduation, her tablet displaying a file she had no business accessing, she felt her professional composure cracking like ice under pressure. The file was a patchwork of black bars and fragments. Entire paragraphs redacted into oblivion. But enough remained to tell a story that made her hands shake. Operation Crimson Tide. March 2006. Kidder Province. A 2-man sniper team, call signs Ghost and Beacon, had violated direct orders to engage an enemy force of over 40 fighters. 14 confirmed kills at ranges exceeding 1,000 meters. A platoon of 19 extracted from certain death. 1 operator killed in action. 1 operator survived to carry out the bodies. The survivor's identity was classified at a level she did not have clearance for. But the call sign was right there in the header, plain as day. Iron Ghost. She looked at the man in the threadbare blazer, the man Admiral Harlow had tried to have removed like trash from the lawn. The man who was now standing with tears on his face, watching his daughter become an officer. The security officers had backed off after she intercepted them. She had spoken quickly, urgently, showing them enough of the file to make them hesitate. She did not have the authority to countermand the Admiral's orders, but she had enough rank to create doubt, and doubt was all she needed to buy time. Now she stood watching Elias Vance, trying to reconcile the legend in the file with the humble figure before her. Iron Ghost had been responsible for more confirmed kills than any SEAL sniper in the modern era. His operations read like a greatest hits of impossible missions. Hostage extractions, high-value target eliminations, counter-sniper duels against the best marksmen enemy forces could field. He had operated in theaters that the United States officially denied any involvement in. He had done things that would remain classified until long after everyone who knew about them was dead. And then, 18 years ago, he had simply vanished, resigned his commission, walked away from everything he had built. The file contained no explanation, just a note that his departure had been approved at the highest levels and his identity sealed for reasons of national security. She had assumed he was dead. Most of the operators from that era were, one way or another, combat or cancer or the slow poison of memories that never faded. But he was not dead. He was standing 30 feet away from her, wearing a blazer from a thrift store and crying at his daughter's graduation. The ceremony was winding down. Families were beginning to rise from their seats, moving toward the field where the new officers waited to receive congratulations. Admiral Harlow had descended from the stage and was working the crowd, shaking hands and accepting compliments on his speech. He was moving toward the family section. Reyes felt her stomach tighten. The Admiral had not forgotten his confrontation with the shabby man in the third row. She could see it in the set of his shoulders, the purposeful angle of his approach. He was coming to finish what he had started, to demonstrate that no one disrupted his ceremonies without consequence. She moved to intercept him, but the crowd was thick and she was not fast enough. Admiral Harlow reached Elias before she could get there. "I thought I told you to stay put," Harlow said, his voice carrying that particular blend of authority and contempt that powerful men used when addressing those they consider beneath them. "Security should have dealt with you by now." Elias turned slowly. His tears had dried, leaving tracks on his weathered face. His eyes, when they met the Admiral's, held something that made Harlow take an involuntary half-step backward. "I'm not going anywhere, sir," Elias said quietly. "My daughter just received her commission. I intend to congratulate her." "Your daughter?" Harlow's lip curled. "We have been through this. You expect me to believe that an officer in the United States Navy came from someone like you? Someone like me?" The words hung in the air. Around them, families were beginning to notice the confrontation again. Phones appeared in hands. The modern reflex to document everything. Captain Reyes finally pushed through the crowd, slightly out of breath. "Admiral," she said, her voice pitched low and urgent. "I need to speak with you. Privately." "Not now, Captain." "Sir, it is important." "I said not now." Harlow did not even look at her. His attention was fixed on Elias with the intensity of a man who had found an enemy he could safely destroy. "We have a trespasser here claiming to be something he is not. I want him removed." The security officers appeared again, summoned by some signal Reyes had not seen. They flanked Elias, their hands not quite touching him, but clearly ready to. Elias did not move, did not flinch. He stood with the perfect stillness of a man who had spent decades learning to be invisible, to be patient, to wait for exactly the right moment. "Sir," Reyes tried again, "you need to hear this. It concerns Operation Crimson Tide." The name landed like a grenade. Harlow's face went blank for just a moment. A flicker of something, surprise or fear or memory, passing behind his eyes before the professional mask reasserted itself. "What about it?" he said carefully. "The man you are trying to remove." Reyes held up her tablet, the file still displayed on the screen. "I believe he is the operator who saved your platoon." Silence. The families nearby had stopped pretending not to watch. The security officers exchanged uncertain glances. Even the spring breeze seemed to pause, waiting to see what would happen next. Harlow looked at the tablet, looked at Elias, looked back at the tablet. "That is impossible," he said, but his voice had lost its certainty. That operator's identity was never declassified. No one knows who he was. Elias reached up slowly, giving the security officers time to see that he was not making any sudden moves. His fingers found the collar of his shirt and pulled it aside, revealing the chain around his neck. 2 sets of dog tags, a wedding ring, and beneath them, visible now in the afternoon light, the edge of a tattoo that ran down his chest. Coordinates, a date, a trident, and 2 initials that Captain Reyes recognized from the file. T.S. Terrence Shaw, call sign Beacon, the operator who had died saving Iron Ghost's life. "The man you are looking for," Elias said quietly, never broke eye contact with Harlow. "The man who saved your platoon." He met Harlow's gaze with 18 years of buried truth. His call sign was Iron Ghost. The words settled over the crowd like ash from a distant fire. Iron Ghost, a call sign that meant nothing to the civilian families nearby, but landed with devastating weight on everyone who had ever worn uniform. Admiral Harlow's face had gone the color of old paper. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. For the first time in perhaps decades, he could not find words. Captain Reyes stepped forward, her tablet extended like evidence in a trial. "Sir, the file confirms it. Operation Crimson Tide, March 17, 2006. A 2-man sniper team violated orders to engage. 14 confirmed kills. Your platoon extracted. 1 operator killed in action. 1 survivor." She looked at Elias with something like reverence. "Call sign Iron Ghost," she continued. "Master Chief Special Warfare Operator. SEAL Team 4. Then Dev grew. 22 years of service. Resigned his commission in 2006, identity classified at the highest levels. The security officers had taken several steps back. One of them, a former Marine with enough years to recognize what he was seeing, had come to attention without seeming to realize it. "This is ridiculous," Harlow said, but his voice had lost all its earlier certainty. Anyone could claim to be someone from a classified file. There is no way to verify. Elias said nothing. He simply rolled up his left sleeve, slowly, deliberately, exposing his forearm to the afternoon light. The tattoo covered the inside of his arm from wrist to elbow. Coordinates in precise military notation: 34.802 1 degrees north, 71.096 1 degrees east. Below them, a date, March 17, 2006. Below that, a trident rendered in faded black ink, the symbol of the SEAL teams. And woven through all of it, 14 small tally marks and 2 sets of initials. T.S. and E.V. Terrence Shaw and Elias Vance. The 2 men who had been on that ridge. One who died there and one who carried him home. The Admiral stared at the tattoo. His hands had begun to tremble. "Those coordinates," Reyes said softly. "They match the location in the file exactly. The location of your ambush, Admiral." Around them, the crowd had grown. Word was spreading through the graduation ceremony that something was happening in the family section, something significant. Officers in dress whites were drifting closer. Veterans in the crowd were pressing forward, drawn by instinct toward a moment they did not yet understand. An older man in a Vietnam veteran's cap had pushed his way to the front. He studied Elias's tattoo with eyes that had seen their own share of classified sorrows. His hand rose to his chest in an unconscious salute. Harlow's mouth worked silently. He was staring at the tattoo, at the coordinates he had never forgotten, the coordinates of the valley where he had watched 4 of his men die before salvation came from an unknown position on a distant ridge. He finally managed. "You were there." It was not a question anymore. It was the beginning of understanding. "I was there," Elias confirmed. 1,200 meters out on an overwatch position. Orders were to observe and report only. Under no circumstances to engage. He paused, letting the weight of what came next settle into the silence. "I violated those orders." The Admiral's knees seemed to weaken. He caught himself, straightened, but the effort was visible. "Why?" he breathed. "Your career. Everything you had built. Why would you throw it away?" Elias looked at him for a long moment. 19 men, he said simply. 19 men who were going to die if someone did not act. The math was not complicated, Lieutenant. The old rank landed like a slap. Lieutenant. What Harlow had been on that day, before the decades of promotions and politics and carefully managed reputation. What he had been when he was frozen in a valley, watching his command die around him, unable to do anything but call for help that was not coming. "I've spent 18 years building a career on the lessons I learned that day," Harlow said, his voice hollow. 18 years talking about sacrifice and unknown heroes. "And I never knew." "You were not supposed to know." Elias's voice held no accusation, no anger, just a bone-deep weariness. "The operation was classified. My identity was sealed. That was how it was supposed to work. Then why are you here now? Why reveal yourself?" Elias almost smiled. "I am not here to reveal myself, Admiral. I am here to watch my daughter graduate. You are the one who demanded to know my call sign." The irony of it seemed to strike Harlow physically. He swayed slightly, steadied himself on the arm of a nearby chair. Captain Reyes had lowered her tablet. She was watching the 2 men with the expression of someone witnessing history unfold in real time. The crowd continued to grow. Someone had recognized what was happening, had begun explaining to those nearby. The words "Iron Ghost" rippled outward through the assembled families like a stone dropped in still water. Among the newly commissioned officers on the field, Maya Vance had noticed the commotion. She was trying to see through the crowd, trying to understand why so many people had gathered around the family section, around where her father had been sitting. Admiral Harlow drew himself up slowly. The color was returning to his face, but it was not the flush of anger anymore. It was something else, something that looked almost like shame. I try to have you removed, he said. I mocked you. I questioned your service. In front of your daughter. In front of everyone. Yes, sir. And you said nothing. You just sat there and took it. Elias met his eyes. My daughter was about to receive her commission, Admiral. That was the only thing that mattered to me. Not my pride. Not my reputation. Her. The Admiral was silent for a long moment. When he spoke again, his voice had changed. The authority was still there, but it was tempered now with something human. I owe you my life, he said. I have owed you my life for 18 years without knowing it. And this is how I repaid that debt. He looked around at the crowd, at the phones recording everything, at the faces watching with a mixture of confusion and dawning understanding. How do I make this right? He asked. The question was genuine, stripped of all pretense. Elias considered the question. His hand found the challenge coin in his pocket, Beacon's coin, worn smooth by 18 years of constant touch. You want to make it right, he said slowly. Then remember this moment the next time you see someone who does not look the way you think they should. Remember that you cannot know what someone has carried just by looking at them. He paused. And let me go congratulate my daughter. The Admiral nodded slowly. Then, in full view of everyone, he stepped aside and gestured toward the field where the new officers waited. The path was clear. But before Elias could take a step, a voice cut through the crowd. A voice he would have recognized anywhere, in any circumstance, across any distance. Dad. Maya was pushing through the assembled families, her white uniform blazing, her composure finally cracking as she fought her way toward him. And Elias felt something break open in his chest that had been sealed shut for 18 years. Maya pushed through the last row of onlookers and stopped 3 feet from her father. Her chest was heaving from the effort of crossing the field, her carefully pinned hair coming loose, her white uniform slightly askew. But none of that mattered. What mattered was the look on her face as she stared at the man she thought she knew. Dad, she said again, the word catching in her throat. What is happening? What are they talking about? Elias looked at his daughter, at the woman she had become while he worked night shifts and double jobs, while he packed her lunches and helped with her homework and sat in the front row of every event that mattered. At the officer she now was, the dream her mother had carried and he had nurtured through 18 years of quiet sacrifice. He had kept so much from her, had buried so much of himself so that she could have a father instead of a ghost. Maya, he started, but she cut him off. Iron Ghost. She said the words like she was testing them, trying to make them fit with the reality she had always known. They're saying you were called Iron Ghost, that you save an entire platoon, that you have more confirmed kills than any SEAL sniper in modern history. Her voice cracked on the last word. Is it true? The question hung between them, 18 years of secrets balanced on its edge. Elias could have deflected, could have minimized, could have done what he had always done, wrapped the truth in enough vagueness that she never had to carry the weight of it. But looking at her now, at the naval officer she had become, he realized that she deserved better than that. She deserved the truth, all of it, even the parts that hurt. Yes, he said quietly. It is true. Maya's face went through a series of expressions too fast to track. Confusion, disbelief, something that might have been anger. You never told me, she said. All those years, all those times I asked about your service. You just said you were a SEAL and that you did not like to talk about it. I know. I spent years being embarrassed that you were a janitor. She was crying now, the tears cutting tracks through her composure. I told my roommates my father worked in maintenance. I did not want them to know that you mop floors for a living. Maya, I was ashamed of you. Her voice broke completely. I was ashamed of my own father because he did not look successful, because he did not have a fancy job or nice clothes or any of the things I thought mattered. Elias felt his own tears starting again. The guilt he had carried for so long, the weight of everything he had chosen and everything it had cost, pressed down on his chest until he could barely breathe. I took that job so I could be there, he said. The night shift at the school. It meant I could be home when you woke up. I could make you breakfast. I could walk you to school when you were little and sit in the front row at your concerts when you were older. I could be your father instead of a name you only heard on holidays. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the photograph. Maya at 6, gap-toothed and grinning, holding up her crayon drawing. I have carried this every single day since your mother died, he said. Every shift, every sleepless night, every time I want to give up. I looked at this face and remembered why I was still fighting. Maya stared at the photograph, at the image of herself from a lifetime ago, young and innocent and unaware of everything her father had done and sacrificed. Why did you leave the teams? She asked. The real reason. Elias was quiet for a moment. Around them, the crowd had gone still, sensing that they were witnessing something private and profound. Your mother made me promise, he finally said, the night before my last deployment. She made me promise to come home. Not just my body, me, the man she married, the father you needed. He paused, the memory of Sarah's voice washing over him. And then she died while I was gone. A car accident on a rainy Tuesday. I was 8,000 miles away, doing things I can never tell you about, and she died alone. Maya's hand found his arm, gripping it tightly. I could not look at you without seeing her, Elias continued. You have her eyes, her smile, her way of tilting your head when you are thinking. And for months after I came home, being near you felt like being burned alive. Dad, I had a choice. I could keep being Iron Ghost, keep doing the work I was trained for, keep disappearing into operations that would take me further and further from you. Or I could put that away, all of it, and try to be the father your mother wanted you to have. He looked at her with eyes that held 22 years of love and loss and unwavering commitment. I chose you, Maya. Every time. For 18 years, I chose you. The job at the school, the long shifts, the secondhand clothes. All of it was so I could be there, so I could keep my promise to your mother, even though she was gone. Maya was sobbing openly now, her shoulders shaking, her composure utterly abandoned. I did not know she managed. I never knew any of it. You were not supposed to know. Elias pulled her into his arms, holding her the way he had when she was small, when the world was scary and his embrace was the safest place she knew. You were supposed to have a normal life. A father who showed up and helped with homework and embarrassed you at school events. Not a ghost, not a legend, just a dad. She clung to him, her face pressed against his threadbare blazer, her tears soaking into the fabric. I am so sorry, she whispered. I am so sorry I was ashamed of you. Elias held her tighter. There is nothing to be sorry for. You did not know. And honestly, Maya, I would rather have you be embarrassed by a janitor who loves you than proud of a hero who was never there. The crowd around them had grown silent. Even Admiral Harlow stood motionless, watching the reunion with an expression that suggested he was seeing something he had never expected to witness. Captain Reyes wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. The Vietnam veteran had removed his cap entirely, pressing it against his chest. Maya pulled back slightly, looking up at her father's face. The face she had known her whole life, now transformed by context into something entirely new. Iron Ghost, she said softly. That was really your call sign. Elias smiled. The first real smile he had allowed himself in longer than he could remember. It was, he said, but I have not answered to it in 18 years. These days I just answered Dad. Maya laughed through her tears. A broken sound, but real. Authentic. She hugged him again, and this time Elias felt something shift in his chest. A weight lifting. A door opening. For 18 years, he had been a ghost. Invisible. Unknown. Carrying his secrets alone. But standing here, holding his daughter in the middle of her graduation, surrounded by people who finally knew the truth, he felt something he had almost forgotten was possible. He felt seen. The moment between father and daughter stretched into something that felt almost sacred. But the world had not stopped turning, and Admiral Harlow had not finished reckoning with what he had done. He stepped forward slowly, his movements carrying none of the arrogance that had defined him earlier. The transformation was remarkable. Where before he had stood like a man accustomed to being the most important person in any room, now he approached like a supplicant seeking absolution. Master Chief Vance, he said, and the use of the rank was deliberate. I owe you more than an apology. I owe you my life. I have owed you my life for 18 years. Maya pulled back from her father's embrace, keeping one hand on his arm as if afraid he might disappear. She looked at the Admiral with eyes still red from crying. What do you mean? She asked. Harlow's face was ashen. Your father saved my platoon in Afghanistan. March 2006. We were ambushed in a valley with no extraction possible. I watched 4 of my men die in the first 2 minutes. The rest of us were going to follow them. He paused, the memory clearly painful. I was frozen. He continued. I was supposed to be the leader, the officer in charge, and I could not move. Could not think. Could not do anything but watch my command die around me. Elias said nothing. His hand found Maya's and squeezed gently. And then something changed, Harlow said. Enemy fighters started dropping, one after another, from a position so far away we could not even hear the rifle. Someone was engaging from over 1,000 meters out, creating a gap in the enemy line. He looked at Elias with something like wonder. That was you. You violated your orders. You risked your entire career, your freedom, everything, for 19 men you had never met. The math was not complicated, Elias said quietly. It was the same thing he had said before, but now Maya understood what it meant. Understood the weight of those simple words. There were consequences, Harlow pressed. There had to be consequences for violating a direct order. There were. What happened? Elias was quiet for a moment. The memory of that debrief, the cold room and the colder faces of the officers who held his fate in their hands, rose unbidden. I was facing court-martial, he said, disobeying a direct order during combat operations. Career over, possibly prison time. The operation was supposed to be observation only. We were not supposed to exist. Maya's grip on his hand tightened. What changed? She asked. The men I saved, Elias said. They wrote letters. Every single one of them. Lieutenant Harlow included. They wrote to everyone they could think of, from the base commander up to the Joint Chiefs. They made it clear that if the Navy prosecuted me for saving their lives, they would all go public with exactly what had happened. Harlow nodded slowly. I remember writing that letter. I did not know who I was writing it for, just a call sign and a report. But I knew that whoever Iron Ghost was, he deserved better than a court-martial. The charges were dropped, Elias continued, but the operation was classified at the highest levels. My identity was sealed. I was given a Navy Cross and a closed ceremony with 3 witnesses and told that if I ever spoke about what happened, I would spend the rest of my life in a federal prison. And yet you are speaking about it now, Maya said. Elias looked at Admiral Harlow. I did not bring this up. The Admiral asked me for my call sign. He demanded to know who I was. He is the one who opened this door. Harlow flinched as if struck. You are right, he said. I did this. I created this situation because I could not see past a threadbare blazer and worn shoes. I looked at you and saw someone beneath me, someone to be removed. He drew himself up, and when he spoke again, his voice carried across the crowd. I was wrong, he said loudly enough for everyone to hear. I was wrong about this man. I was wrong to judge him by his appearance. I was wrong to try to have him removed. And I was wrong to mock his service. The crowd shifted. Murmurs rippled through the assembled families. Phones that had been recording lowered slightly as people processed what they were witnessing. This man, Harlow continued, gesturing toward Elias, saved my life. Saved the lives of 18 other Americans. And then he walked away from everything he had built, gave up a legendary career, so he could be present for his daughter. He looked at Maya. You should know, Ensign Vance, that your father is one of the greatest warriors this country has ever produced. The things he did, the sacrifices he made, most of it will never be declassified. But I can tell you this. Iron Ghost was a name spoken with reverence in every special operations unit from Coronado to Virginia Beach. He was the standard we all measured ourselves against. Maya was crying again, but these were different tears. Not grief or confusion. Something closer to pride. And he gave all of that up, Harlow said. He gave it up to mop floors and work night shifts and be there for you. That is not weakness. That is not failure. That is the definition of what a father should be. The Admiral turned back to Elias. I have built my career on the foundation of what happened in that valley, he said. Every promotion, every command, every speech about sacrifice and leadership. All of it traces back to that day, To the lesson, I learned about what it means to be saved by someone who owes you nothing. He paused, and until today, I never knew who taught me that lesson. I never had the chance to say thank you. Harlow came to attention. The crisp, parade ground attention of a man who had spent 40 years in uniform. And then, in full view of everyone, he raised his hand in a salute. "Thank you, Master Chief," he said, "for my life, for the lives of my men, for everything you sacrificed that day and every day since." The silence that followed was absolute. Elias looked at the Admiral, at the man who had tried to humiliate him, who had demanded his removal, who had mocked his service, at the man who was now standing at attention, saluting him in front of hundreds of witnesses. He could have left the salute unreturned, could have made the Admiral hold that position, let him feel even a fraction of the humiliation he had tried to inflict. But that was not who Elias Vance was. It had never been who he was. He released Maya's hand gently and straightened his own posture. The threadbare blazer and worn shoes did not matter. The years of night shifts and sacrifice did not matter. What mattered was the man inside the clothes, the warrior who had never stopped being a warrior even when he traded his rifle for a mop. Elias raised his hand and returned the salute with the precision of 22 years of service. "You are welcome, Admiral," he said quietly. "Now, if you will excuse me, I have a graduation to celebrate with my daughter." He dropped the salute, turned to Maya, and smiled. "What do you say, Ensign Vance? Can I buy you lunch?" Maya laughed through her tears and threw her arms around him again. Behind them, Admiral Harlow slowly lowered his hand. His career would never be the same after today. The videos were already spreading, the story already growing. But looking at the father and daughter embracing in front of him, he found that he did not care. Some lessons were worth learning, even if they came 18 years late. The salute between the Admiral and the janitor had barely ended when the ripples began spreading through the crowd in earnest. What had started as a confrontation witnessed by a few dozen families had become something far larger. The name Iron Ghost moved through the assembled guests like electricity through water. A retired command master chief near the back of the crowd had gone pale. He was gripping his wife's arm, whispering urgently. I served with men who talked about him. They said he was the best sniper the team's ever produced. They said he could shoot through a hurricane and still hit center mass. Near the stage, a group of newly commissioned officers had clustered together, their phones out, searching for any information they could find about the call sign that had just transformed their graduation ceremony. But it was the veterans in the crowd who understood most deeply what they were witnessing. Men and women who had served in different branches, different eras, different wars, but who all recognized the weight of what had just been revealed. The Vietnam veteran who had been watching since the beginning pushed his way forward. His cap was still pressed against his chest, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Master Chief," he said, his voice rough with age and emotion. "My name is Harold Patterson. I served 2 tours in the Mekong Delta. I never did anything close to what you did, but I know what it costs to come home and try to be normal again. I know what it costs to keep the war inside, so the people you love do not have to carry it." He extended his hand. "It is an honor to meet you, sir." Elias took the offered hand and shook it firmly. "The honor is mine," he said. Mekong Delta was no place for the faint of heart. Patterson laughed, a wet sound. No, it was not. He held the handshake a moment longer, then stepped back and snapped a salute that was decades old but still crisp. "Welcome home, brother," he said, "even if it is 18 years late." The salute spread. One by one, veterans in the crowd came to attention and raised their hands. An Army colonel in dress greens, a Marine gunnery sergeant with silver in his hair, a young Navy lieutenant who had graduated from this same academy 5 years earlier, a Coast Guard chief who had driven 3 hours to watch his nephew receive his commission. They did not know the details of what Iron Ghost had done. Most of them never would, but they knew enough. They knew that a man who had given everything for his country had then given everything again for his daughter. They knew that sacrifice like that deserved recognition, even if it came in a parking lot at a graduation ceremony, even if it was 18 years overdue. Elias stood in the center of the spreading salutes, his daughter's hand in his threadbare blazer and worn shoes suddenly irrelevant. He was not a janitor in this moment. He was not a forgotten veteran scraping by on night shifts and secondhand clothes. He was Iron Ghost, and the community he had walked away from was welcoming him back. Maya watched it happen with wonder on her face. She had grown up knowing her father was a veteran, knowing he had served in the SEAL teams, but she had never understood what that meant, had never grasped the weight of the brotherhood he had left behind. Now she was seeing it, seeing the way these strangers looked at her father with reverence and respect, seeing the tears on the faces of men who had been trained to show no weakness, seeing the community that existed beneath the surface of civilian life, invisible until moments like this brought it into the light. "Dad," she whispered, "they are all saluting you." Elias's eyes were wet, but his voice was steady. "They're saluting what I represent, sweetheart. The ones who served and came home broken. The ones who gave up everything and got nothing in return. They are saluting all of us." He raised his own hand, returning the salutes with a gesture that encompassed everyone who had served, everyone who had sacrificed, everyone who had carried the weight of war so that others did not have to. Captain Reyes had moved to Admiral Harlow's side. She spoke quietly, but Elias caught fragments of the conversation. "Sir," she said, "the videos are already online. This is going to be everywhere by tonight." Harlow nodded slowly. "I know. Your career, sir. The optics of this." The Admiral was quiet for a long moment. Then he shook his head. "I spent 40 years building a career," he said, "collecting ribbons and titles and all the things I thought mattered. And today I learned that a man who gave up everything I spent my life chasing is more respected than I will ever be." He looked at Elias, still surrounded by saluting veterans. "Maybe it is time I learned what really matters," he said. The salutes began to drop, one by one. The veterans stepped back, making room, but the atmosphere had fundamentally changed. What had been a standard graduation ceremony had become something else entirely. A moment of recognition. A homecoming. The elderly Marine gunnery sergeant approached next. His chest bore rows of ribbons that told their own story of sacrifice. "Master Chief," he said, "I was at Fallujah in 2004. Different unit, different mission. But I heard stories about a sniper team that pulled off impossible shots to save a convoy that was about to be overrun." He paused. "That was you, was it not?" Elias met his eyes. "That was a long time ago, Gunny." The Marine nodded slowly. "The men in that convoy, some of them are still alive, still raising families, still serving. Because of what you did." He did not salute this time. Instead, he simply extended his hand. "Semper Fi, Master Chief." Elias took the hand. "Semper Fi, Gunny." The stories kept coming. Veterans approaching one by one, each with a fragment of the legend, each with a connection to something Iron Ghost had done in his 22 years of service. An extraction in Somalia, a counter-sniper operation in Iraq, a hostage rescue that had never made the news but had saved the lives of 3 American contractors. Elias had not realized how far his reputation had spread. He had spent 18 years trying to disappear, trying to be invisible, and all the while his ghost had continued to move through the special operations community. A name whispered in training facilities. A legend passed down from senior operators to new recruits. Maya stood beside him through all of it, her hand never leaving his arm. She was learning who her father really was, not through files or reports, but through the faces of the men and women who had served alongside him or been saved by his actions. "This is who you are," she said softly during a brief pause between approaching veterans. "This is who you have always been." Elias looked at her. "No," he said, "this is who I was. Who I am now is your father. That is the only title that matters to me anymore." Maya's eyes filled with fresh tears. "You can be both," she said. "You do not have to choose anymore." And standing there, surrounded by brothers and sisters in arms he had never met, holding his daughter's hand on the day she became an officer, Elias felt the walls he had built begin to crumble. Maybe she was right. Maybe after 18 years, it was finally time to stop being a ghost. The crowd had begun to thin as families drifted toward the reception area, but a core group remained gathered around Elias and Maya. Veterans who could not bring themselves to leave. Officers who wanted to hear more. Captain Reyes, who had appointed herself an unofficial guardian of the moment. Admiral Harlow had not left either. He stood at the edge of the group, watching, listening, his face carrying the weight of a man reassessing everything he thought he knew. It was Reyes who finally broke the contemplative silence. "Master Chief," she said carefully, "there is something else in the file. Something I think you should know about." Elias looked at her. His instincts, honed by decades of reading people and situations, told him that whatever she was about to say would change things again. "What is it, Captain?" Reyes glanced at her tablet, then back at him. Operation Crimson Tide was not just classified because of the order violation. It was classified because of what happened afterward. The intelligence you gathered from that ridge, the enemy positions you identified during your engagement, it led to a follow-up operation 3 days later. She paused. That operation took out the entire Taliban command structure for the Kunar province. It effectively ended major hostile operations in that region for the next 2 years. Hundreds of American lives saved. Thousands of Afghan civilians protected. The words landed like stones in still water. "I did not know that," Elias said quietly. "You were not supposed to know." Reyes's voice was gentle. "The connection between your actions and the follow-up operation was classified at the highest levels. But the analysts who reviewed your engagement data, the intelligence officers who built the target package, they knew. They called it the Ghost Protocol. Everything that came after traced back to what you did on that ridge." Maya's hand tightened on her father's arm. "Dad," she breathed, "you did not just save 19 men. You saved hundreds, maybe thousands." Elias was silent. He was thinking about Beacon, about the price that had been paid for those 14 shots, about the friend who had stepped into a bullet's path so that Elias could live to take the next shot and the next. "Beacon," he said softly, "you should be here for this. You pay the price. I just pulled the trigger." Reyes shook her head. "With respect, Master Chief, Chief Shaw made his choice. He chose to be there with you. He chose to engage when you engaged. And he chose to save your life when the moment came. That is not a debt you owe. That is a gift he gave." The words hit Elias somewhere deep in the place where he had carried the guilt for 18 years. The place where Beacon's face lived, frozen forever at 29, smiling that quiet smile. "He gave me a gift," Elias repeated slowly, "and I've spent 18 years treating it like a burden." Maya turned to face him fully. "Dad, what happened to Chief Shaw? You have never told me." Elias looked at his daughter, at the officer she had become, strong enough now to carry truths he had protected her from. "He was my spotter," he said, "my best friend. We had been together for 6 years by the time Crimson Tide happened. He knew what I was thinking before I thought it. He could read wind and distance like other people read newspapers." He paused, gathering himself. "When I decided to engage, to violate our orders, he did not hesitate, did not question. He just started calling targets. 14 confirmed kills in 9 minutes, and he fed me every single one of them." The crowd had gone completely still. Even the distant sounds of the reception seemed to fade. After the engagement, we had to move. The enemy had our position. We were 300 meters from the extraction point when a counter-sniper team found us. His voice caught. "Beacon saw the shot coming before I did. He stepped in front of it, took the round that was meant for me." Maya's eyes were streaming tears. "He died in my arms," Elias continued. 90 seconds. That is how long it took. He told me to get the platoon home, told me to get myself home, made me promise to live enough for both of us." He reached into his pocket and pulled out the challenge coin, held it up so Maya could see it clearly for the first time. This was his. "I have carried it every day since. Every night shift. Every time I watched you sleep when you were little. Every moment I want to give up. I would hold this coin and remember that I promised him I would keep living." Maya reached out and touched the coin gently. Her fingers traced the worn edges, the years of handling that had smoothed away the sharp details. "He saved you," she said, "so you could save me." Elias nodded slowly. "That is how I have tried to see it. That is how I have tried to make it mean something." Admiral Harlow stepped forward. His voice was rough when he spoke. "Chief Shaw," he said, "Beacon, I never knew his name. I never knew anything about him except that someone died to save my platoon." He looked at the coin in Elias's hand. "I would like to know more," he said, "if you're willing to tell me." I would like to know the man who gave his life for mine. Elias studied the Admiral for a long moment. The arrogance was gone. The certainty was gone. What remained was something more human. A man confronting the true cost of his survival, perhaps for the first time. His name was Terrence Shaw, Elias said. He was from Mobile, Alabama. He had a daughter he never got to meet. She was born 3 weeks after he died. Harlow's face crumpled. A daughter, he repeated. I have sent money to her every year since. Anonymously. I never had the courage to contact her directly. Never knew what I would say. Reyes looked up sharply from her tablet. Master Chief, she said carefully. About Chief Shaw's daughter. What about her? Reyes hesitated. I did some additional searching while we were talking, following up on details from the file. She turned the tablet around so Elias could see the screen. Her name is Destiny Shaw. She is 23 years old. She graduated from Old Dominion University last year with a degree in nursing. She paused, and according to her social media, she is currently employed at Portsmouth Naval Medical Center. About 45 minutes from here. The world seemed to stop. Elias stared at the screen, at the photograph of a young woman with Beacon's eyes and her mother's smile. A woman he had helped support from the shadows for 18 years without ever seeing her face. She is here, he said. She is so close. Maya gripped his arm. Dad, you have to meet her. After everything, you have to. Elias looked at the photograph for a long moment. Then he looked at his daughter, at the coin in his hand, at the Admiral who was still processing the weight of a debt he had never known he owed. I promised him, Elias said quietly. I promised I would live enough for both of us. Maybe it is time I started keeping that promise properly. He looked at Reyes. Can you give me her contact information, Captain? Reyes smiled. Already done, Master Chief. The call was made that afternoon. Captain Reyes had offered to reach out through official channels, to use her intelligence connections to arrange a proper meeting. Admiral Harlow had offered the resources of his office, his staff, anything that might help facilitate the reunion. But Elias had declined both offers. This is personal, he said. It should stay personal. He made the call from a bench outside the reception hall. Maya, sitting beside him, her white uniform bright against the weathered wood. His hands were steady as he dialed the number Reyes had provided. 22 years of combat had taught him to control his body even when his mind was screaming. The phone rang 3 times before a woman's voice answered. Hello. Elias's throat tightened. The voice was younger than he had expected, but there was something in its cadence that reminded him painfully of Beacon. The same warmth, the same openness. Is this Destiny Shaw? He managed. Yes. Who is this? My name is Elias Vance. I serve with your father. The silence that followed stretched for what felt like hours. When Destiny spoke again, her voice had changed. Smaller somehow, more fragile. You knew my father. I did. He was my spotter, my partner, my best friend. Another silence. Then, barely above a whisper, he died before I was born. I never got to meet him. I know. Elias closed his eyes. I was with him when he died. I held him. I carried him home. He heard a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. You were there, Destiny said. You were the one. Maya's hand found her father's, squeezing gently. I have wanted to contact you for 18 years, Elias continued. I have sent money every year trying to help, but I never had the courage to reach out directly. I never knew what to say, how to explain what your father meant to me, what he did, the money. Destiny's voice cracked. That was you. My mother always wondered. She said it had to be someone who served with him, but she could never find out who. I should have told you sooner. I should have been braver. Your father would have been braver. No. The word came quickly, firmly. You do not get to say that. You do not get to apologize for helping me my entire life without asking for anything in return. Elias opened his eyes, looked at Maya, who was crying silently beside him. I am at the Naval Academy, he said. My daughter just graduated. Received her commission as an ensign. Congratulations, Destiny said, and there was genuine warmth in the word despite the emotion in her voice. I found out today that you work at Portsmouth Naval Medical Center. That is not far from here. 45 minutes, Destiny confirmed. I'm actually off shift today. I was going to visit my mother in Norfolk. She paused. Why are you telling me this, Mr. Vance? Elias took a breath. Because I would like to meet you. if you're willing. I would like to tell you about your father. The real stories, not the redacted reports. I would like you to know who Terrence Shaw really was. The silence this time was different, charged with possibility. Where should I meet you? Destiny asked. 2 hours later, Elias stood in the parking lot of a small diner halfway between Annapolis and Portsmouth. Maya had insisted on coming, and he had not argued. Some moments were too big to face alone. The car that pulled into the lot was modest, practical. A nurse's car, but the woman who stepped out of it made Elias's breath catch in his chest. She had Beacon's eyes, the same warm brown, the same quiet intelligence. Her smile, when she offered it tentatively, carried echoes of that quiet smile Elias had seen 1,000 times on a ridge in Afghanistan. "Mr. Vance," she said. "Elias. Please." "Elias." She extended her hand, then seemed to change her mind. Before he could react, she stepped forward and wrapped her arms around him. He stood frozen for a moment, unprepared for the contact. Then his arms came up slowly, returning the embrace. She smelled like hospital antiseptic and coffee and something floral. She felt like forgiveness. "Thank you," Destiny whispered against his shoulder. "Thank you for being with him. Thank you for bringing him home. Thank you for 18 years of caring about a girl you never met." Elias could not speak. The tears he had been holding back finally broke free, streaming down his weathered face. They stood like that for a long moment, two strangers connected by a man who had died 23 years ago. Then Destiny pulled back, wiping her eyes, and noticed Maya standing nearby. "You must be the new ensign," she said, managing a watery smile. Maya nodded. "Maya Vance. It is an honor to meet you." Destiny looked between father and daughter, something shifting in her expression. "My mother told me stories," she said, "about the men my father served with, about the brotherhood. She said they would die for each other without hesitation." She looked at Elias. "He died for you, did he not?" "That is what happened." Elias nodded slowly. "He stepped in front of a bullet that was meant for me. Saved my life so I could save the platoon we had been covering." Destiny absorbed this. Her eyes went to the challenge coin that Elias had unconsciously pulled from his pocket, his thumb running over its worn surface. "Is that his?" she asked. Elias held it out. "It was in his pocket when he died. I have carried it every day since." She reached out and touched it, her fingers tracing the same paths as had worn smooth over 18 years. "He would have wanted you to have it," she said. "No." Elias closed her fingers around the coin gently. "He would have wanted you to have it. I have carried it long enough. It is time it went home." Destiny stared at the coin in her hand, the last physical piece of a father she had never known, the token that had traveled through 18 years of grief and guilt and quiet perseverance. "Tell me about him," she said, looking up with Beacon's eyes. "Tell me everything." They sat in that diner for 4 hours. Elias talked until his voice gave out, and then he talked some more. He told Destiny about her father's laugh, his skill, his courage. He told her about the jokes Beacon made on long deployments and the letters he wrote to his pregnant wife that he never got to send. He told her about the man who had been his brother in everything but blood. Maya listened too, learning about a man she had never met, but who had shaped her life in ways she was only beginning to understand. Without Beacon's sacrifice, there would be no Elias. Without Elias, there would be no Maya. The chain of cause and effect stretched back through time, connecting them all. When they finally left the diner, the sun was setting. Destiny hugged Elias again, longer this time. "Do not be a stranger," she said. "You are family now. You always have been." Elias nodded, unable to trust his voice. As they drove away, Maya reached over and took her father's hand. "You did a good thing today, Dad." Elias watched Destiny's car disappear in the rearview mirror, Beacon's daughter carrying Beacon's coin into a future her father never got to see. "He finally kept his promise," Elias said quietly. "He told me to live enough for both of us. And now his daughter knows who he really was." He squeezed Maya's hand. Now she can live for him too. 3 months later, Elias stood in a place he had not visited in 18 years. The Seal Memorial in Virginia Beach rose against a gray October sky, its bronze statues and granite walls holding the names of every operator who had given their life in service. The wind off the Atlantic carried the smell of salt and the distant cry of gulls. It was a place built for remembrance, for grief, for the weight of sacrifices that most Americans would never know about. Elias was not alone. Maya stood beside him in her service dress blues, her ensign insignia catching the pale light. She had requested leave specifically for this trip, her first official act as a naval officer. Behind them stood Destiny Shaw, clutching a small bouquet of flowers and wearing a quiet smile that looked exactly like her father's. And behind Destiny, arranged in a loose semicircle, stood a group that would have seemed impossible 3 months ago. Admiral Harlow, his uniform bearing slightly fewer ribbons than the last time Elias had seen him. Captain Reyes, who had become something like a friend in the weeks since the graduation. Harold Patterson, the Vietnam veteran, who had driven 4 hours to be here. The Marine Gunnery Sergeant from Fallujah. A dozen other veterans who had heard about what happened at Annapolis and wanted to pay their respects. They had come to witness something that was 18 years overdue. Elias stepped forward, his dress blues retrieved from storage and altered to fit a body that had changed with years of night shifts and hard labor. The uniform felt strange after so long, familiar and foreign at the same time. But it felt right, too. It felt like coming home. He stopped in front of a section of wall where names were etched in stone. His fingers found the letters without looking. He had traced them in his memory so many times that his hands knew the way. Terrence Beacon Shaw, Chief Petty Officer, March 17th, 2006. Hey, brother, Elias said softly. I brought some people to meet you. He stepped aside, making room for Destiny. She moved forward slowly, her flowers trembling slightly in her grip, and knelt before her father's name. Hi, Dad, she whispered. I know we have never met, but I feel like I know you now. Elias told me everything. He told me about your laugh and your courage and the way you could read the wind better than anyone he ever knew. She placed the flowers at the base of the wall. He also told me how you died, she continued. How you stepped in front of a bullet to save him. How you made him promise to live enough for both of you. She touched the name carved in stone. He kept that promise, Dad. He raised a daughter who became a naval officer. He helped raise me, even though I never knew it. He carried your coin every single day for 18 years. She pulled the challenge coin from her pocket, the same coin Elias had given her at the diner. She held it up so the light caught its worn surface. And now I'm going to carry it, she said. I'm going to live enough for both of us, too. You meet Elias, Maya. We are all connected now. We are all family. She pressed her lips to the coin, then to her father's name on the wall. I love you, Dad, even though we never met. I love you. She rose slowly, tears streaming down her face, and stepped back into the group. Maya put an arm around her shoulders. 2 daughters of warriors, bound together by sacrifices made before either of them fully understood what sacrifice meant. Admiral Harlow stepped forward next. His face was solemn, stripped of all the arrogance that had defined him at the graduation. Chief Shaw, he said to the wall, my name is Vincent Harlow. I was the lieutenant whose platoon you, an Iron Ghost, saved in that valley. I have spent 18 years not knowing your name, not knowing the price that was paid for my survival. His voice cracked. I cannot give you those years back. I cannot undo the career I built on a foundation I did not understand. But I can promise you this. I will spend whatever time I have left making sure that men like you are never forgotten, that the sacrifices made in the shadows are brought into the light. He came to attention and rendered a slow, perfect salute. Rest easy, Chief. Your watch is over. We have the con. One by one, the others stepped forward. Patterson spoke of brotherhood and the bonds forged in combat. The Marine Gunnery Sergeant spoke of the ripple effects of courage, how one act of bravery could save lives decades into the future. Captain Reyes spoke of the intelligence work that had traced the Ghost Protocol to its source, the hundreds of operations that had been built on the foundation Beacon and Elias laid on that ridge. Finally, only Elias remained. He stepped forward and placed his hand on the cold stone. The name beneath his palm was worn smooth by years of other hands, other visitors, other mourners. But it was still there, still remembered. I spent 18 years running from this place, he said quietly. Running from you. From what happened. from the guilt of being the one who survived. He paused. I told myself I was keeping my promise, living enough for both of us. But I was not really living, Beacon. I was hiding. I was so afraid of being seen, being known, being Iron Ghost again, that I forgot how to be Elias. His voice strengthened. But I am done hiding now. Your daughter knows who you were. My daughter knows who I am. The Admiral knows what you sacrificed for him. The whole world is starting to understand the price that men like you pay so they can sleep safe at night. He leaned his forehead against the stone. You saved my life, brother. And I finally understand what that means. It does not mean I owe you a debt I can never repay. It means you gave me a gift. The gift of more time, more moments with my daughter, more chances to make a difference. He stepped back, his hand lingering on the name. I'm going to use that gift, Beacon. I'm going to stop being a ghost and start being a man again. I'm going to help other veterans find their way back, the way I finally found mine. He smiled, and for the first time in 18 years, it reached his eyes. Still here, brother. Still trying. And this time, I'm not trying alone. The group stood in silence for a long moment, the wind carrying their grief and their gratitude out over the Atlantic. Then Maya stepped forward and took her father's hand. Come on, Dad, she said. There's a cookout at the base. Some of the guys from your old unit heard you were in town. They want to hear your stories. Elias looked at his daughter, at Destiny, at the assembled veterans who had become something like family. My stories, he repeated. Maya smiled. Your stories. Iron Ghost stories. It is time the world heard them from you, instead of from classified files. Elias looked back at Beacon's name one last time. What do you think, brother? He murmured. Time to let the ghost speak. The wind gusted, carrying the scent of the sea and the distant sound of waves. And somewhere in that wind, Elias could have sworn he heard a quiet laugh. The laugh of a friend who had been waiting 18 years for this moment. He turned away from the wall and walked toward the parking lot, his daughter on one side and Beacon's daughter on the other. Behind him, the names on the memorial caught the afternoon light. Hundreds of warriors. Hundreds of sacrifices. Hundreds of stories that would never be fully told. But one story, at least, had finally found its ending. And its beginning. If this story moved you, if it reminded you that heroes walk among us every day in threadbare blazers and worn shoes, please subscribe to our channel. Share in the comments. Who is the quiet hero in your life? Who is the person whose sacrifices go unnoticed, whose courage goes unrecognized, whose love speaks louder than any medal or ribbon ever could? Sometimes the greatest warriors are not the ones in uniform. Sometimes they're the ones who put down their weapons to pick up their children. Thank you for watching.